Steve Harvey had been hosting Family Feud long enough to know that every family that walked onto his stage carried something with them. Sometimes it was excitement, sometimes it was nervousness, and sometimes, hidden behind matching outfits and rehearsed smiles, it was a secret so heavy that no amount of game show energy could hold it down forever. On a Friday afternoon in January 2025, that secret exploded. A husband stood at the podium and told a lie so brazen, so deeply personal, that his own wife could not contain herself. She interrupted him mid-sentence, looked him in the eyes in front of 200 strangers and millions of future viewers, and dismantled his entire story piece by piece. What she revealed was not just a lie about money or a lie about another woman, it was a lie about who he was as a father. And when the dust settled, Steve Harvey did something the producers had never seen in the history of the show. He froze everything. He stopped the game, stopped the clock, stopped the cameras from cutting away. And he stood in the middle of that stage because he understood that what was happening in front of him mattered more than any survey answer ever could. Because the most dangerous lies are not the ones we tell strangers, they are the ones we tell the people who trust us the most. Her name was Monique Davis. She was 38 years old, born and raised on the south side of Chicago. If you asked anyone who knew Monique to describe her in one word, most of them would say solid. Not flashy, not loud. Solid, the kind of woman who showed up. For everything. For everyone. No matter what. Monique was the oldest of 4 children. Her mother Loretta had worked as a home health aide for over 25 years, caring for elderly patients in their homes while raising her own children in a 2-bedroom apartment. Monique's father had left when she was 9. He did not disappear all at once. He faded. First it was late nights, then missed dinners, then entire weekends gone. Then one Tuesday morning, Monique woke up for school and his side of the closet was empty. No note, no explanation, just hangers swinging in the dark. Loretta never bad-mouthed him. She never sat her children down and called their father names or told them he was a bad man. She just kept going. She packed lunches, she braided hair, she worked double shifts, she signed permission slips at midnight. She became both parents in one body, and she did it without ever once asking for credit or sympathy. Monique watched all of it. She absorbed every lesson her mother taught without words. That loyalty meant showing up, that love meant sacrifice, that a real parent did not quit, no matter how tired or broken they felt. Monique carried those lessons into adulthood like armor. She put herself through community college while working at a grocery store. She earned a nursing degree at 26 and got a job at a hospital on the west side of the city. She was good at it. Patients loved her because she was patient and warm. Doctors respected her because she was thorough and never cut corners. She was the nurse who stayed past her shift to sit with a patient who was scared. She was the nurse who memorized every patient's name, their spouse's name, their grandchildren's names. She treated every person in her care the way she wished someone had treated her mother during all those years of quiet suffering. At 27, Monique met Anthony Davis at a friend's barbecue. Anthony was 30, a construction supervisor who managed crews on commercial building sites around the city. He was broad-shouldered, soft-spoken, and had the kind of calm energy that made Monique feel safe. He was not the loudest person in the room. He was not trying to impress anyone. He just stood by the grill, flipping burgers, and asked Monique how she liked hers cooked. That was their first conversation. Simple, easy, no games. They dated for 2 years before getting married at a small ceremony in Loretta's church. Monique wore her mother's veil. Loretta cried through the entire service, not from sadness but from relief. She had prayed every night for years that her oldest daughter would find a man who would stay. A man who would be present. A man who would not fade the way Monique's father had. Anthony seemed like that man. For years he was that man. They had 2 children together. Their son Isaiah was now 9 years old. Their daughter Nia was 6. Isaiah was quiet and observant, the kind of kid who noticed things other children missed. He would ask questions like, "Mom, why does the sky turn pink before it gets dark?" and then sit quietly, actually thinking about the answer. Nia was the opposite. She was energy in human form. She danced everywhere she went. She sang songs she made up. She laughed so hard at her own jokes that she would fall over before she finished the punchline. Together, Isaiah and Nia were Monique's entire world. Anthony loved the kids. At least, that was what he told everyone. He told his co-workers. He told his friends. He told anyone who would listen that he was a family man, that his kids were everything, that being a father was the most important job he had ever had. He said all the right words. He posted photos on social media. He showed up to birthday parties and school plays with a big smile and a camera in his hand. But Monique knew something that the rest of the world did not. Anthony was a liar. The lies did not start big. They never do. They started with small things that Monique could almost convince herself were misunderstandings. Anthony would tell his friends he had coached Isaiah's Little League team. He had not. He had shown up to one practice, stood on the sidelines for 20 minutes, then left to take a phone call and never came back. The actual coach was a retired school teacher named Mr. Williams, a man who had volunteered his own time every Saturday morning for the entire season. But when Anthony's friends asked about the team, Anthony talked about it like he had built the whole program from the ground up. He told his mother that he had taken the kids to the zoo 3 weekends in a row. Monique had taken them. All 3 times. By herself. Anthony had been on the couch watching football each of those Sundays. But when his mother called to say how proud she was that Anthony was spending quality time with the kids, Anthony said, "Yeah, Mom, that is what dads do," and Monique stood in the kitchen listening and said nothing. He told people at work that he handled bedtime every night, that he read stories to Nia and checked Isaiah's homework. Monique handled bedtime every night. Every single night. She was the one who read Goodnight Moon until the pages were soft from handling. She was the one who sat at the kitchen table with Isaiah, working through math problems until his eyes drooped. Anthony was in the garage, or on his phone, or already asleep by the time she finished tucking the kids in. At first, Monique told herself it was not a big deal. Lots of fathers exaggerated a little. Lots of men talked a bigger game than they played. She did not want to be the wife who publicly corrected her husband. She did not want to start a fight over something that seemed petty. So she let it go. Again and again and again, she let it go. But then the lies got bigger. And they started to have consequences. When Isaiah was 7, his school held a father-son reading night. Isaiah talked about it for weeks. He picked out the book he wanted to read with his dad. He practiced reading it out loud so he would not stumble over the words. He laid out his clothes the night before. Monique had never seen her son so excited about anything. Anthony said he would be there. He promised. He looked Isaiah in the eyes and said, "I will be there, little man. I would not miss it." Anthony did not show up. He called Monique at 6:30 that evening and said his boss had asked him to stay late for an emergency project. Monique could hear bar noise in the background. Music, laughter, the clink of glasses. She did not say anything. She just drove to the school, walked into the gymnasium, and sat next to her son, who was the only child in the room without a father beside him. Isaiah did not cry. That was the part that destroyed Monique. He did not cry. He just closed his book, put it back in his backpack, and said, "It is okay, Mom. I knew he was not coming." A 7-year-old boy said those words. I knew he was not coming. As if he had already learned, at 7 years old, that his father's promises were decorations. Pretty to look at but hollow inside. Monique held it together at the school. She smiled at the other parents. She clapped during the reading presentations. She drove Isaiah home and tucked him into bed and kissed his forehead and told him she was proud of him. And then she went to the bathroom, locked the door, turned on the shower so no one could hear, and sobbed until her chest hurt. When Anthony came home at 11 that night, smelling like beer and cigarette smoke, Monique was sitting at the kitchen table waiting for him. She told him what had happened. She told him what Isaiah had said. She told him that their son had already stopped believing in him. Anthony got defensive. He said the boss had made him stay. He said he did not have a choice. He said Monique was overreacting. He said, "It was one night, Monique. He will get over it. He will get over it." Monique filed those words away in the place where she kept all of Anthony's broken promises. That place was getting crowded. Over the next 2 years, the pattern repeated itself in different forms. Anthony missed Nia's dance recital. He forgot Isaiah's parent-teacher conference. He said he would take the kids to the park on Saturday and then slept until noon. Each time, he had an excuse. Work, traffic, exhaustion, and each time, he told the outside world a different story. A story where he was present. A story where he was involved. A story where he was Father of the Year. The gap between who Anthony pretended to be and who he actually was grew wider every month. And Monique was the only person standing in that gap, holding both sides together with her bare hands while the children walked across. Her breaking point came on Thanksgiving. The whole family had gathered at Loretta's apartment. Aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone. After dinner, Anthony stood up to make a toast. He held his glass of sweet tea and launched into a speech about how grateful he was for his family. He talked about how he had promised himself he would always be there for his kids. He talked about how he coached Isaiah's team and took Nia to her dance classes and read them stories every night. He talked about how being a father was his greatest achievement. Monique sat at the table listening to every word. Her jaw was tight. Her hands were pressed flat against her thighs under the table. She could feel her pulse in her temples. Across the table, Loretta was watching her. Loretta, who knew her daughter better than anyone on earth, could see the storm building behind Monique's calm expression. But Monique did not say anything. Not at Thanksgiving. Not in front of the whole family. She swallowed it. She pushed it down. She smiled and helped clear the dishes and drove home in silence while Anthony sang along to the radio like he had not just rewritten history in front of 20 people who had no idea the truth was sitting right next to him. That night, lying in bed, Monique made a decision. She was done being the silent witness to Anthony's fake fatherhood. She was done watching him take credit for her work. She was done watching her children grow up with a father who performed love instead of practicing it. She was done. But she did not yet know how or when the reckoning would come. 3 weeks later, the Family Feud producers called. The Davis family had applied months ago, back when Anthony had filled out the application as another opportunity to be on camera, another stage for his performance. Monique had almost forgotten about it. When the call came, her first instinct was to say no. But then she thought about Isaiah sitting alone in that gymnasium. She thought about Nia asking why Daddy did not come to her recital. She thought about that Thanksgiving toast and the way Anthony had smiled while lying to a room full of people who trusted him. And Monique said yes. The Davis family arrived at the Family Feud studio in Los Angeles on a cold January morning. Anthony was in his element. He wore a crisp white shirt and a gray vest, looking like a man who had dressed for a magazine cover rather than a game show. He shook hands with the crew, joked with the makeup team, and walked onto the set with the swagger of someone who believed the cameras existed specifically for him. Monique wore a deep burgundy blouse and simple gold hoops. Her hair was pulled back neatly. She looked calm, composed. If you did not know her story, you would think she was just a quiet woman standing next to her confident husband. But if you looked at her eyes, really looked, you would see something sharp behind the calm. Something waiting. Isaiah and Nia were there too, sitting in the audience section with Monique's younger sister Tanya. The kids were excited. Nia kept waving at the cameras. Isaiah sat quietly, watching everything with those observant eyes of his. Their opponents were the Baker family from Sacramento, a jovial group of 5 led by a retired postal worker named Big Earl, whose laugh was so loud and genuine that it made the entire studio feel warmer. Steve Harvey hit it off with Big Earl immediately, and the early rounds were full of energy and laughter. The Davis family was doing well. They won the first 2 rounds handily. Anthony was aggressive on the buzzer, confident with his answers, and theatrical with his celebrations. Every time the family scored, he would turn to the audience and pump his fist. Every time Monique or Tanya gave a correct answer, Anthony would nod like a coach acknowledging a play he had drawn up. Steve noticed the dynamic. He noticed that Anthony talked over his family members. He noticed that when Monique gave an answer, Anthony would repeat it louder, as if he needed to put his stamp on it. He noticed these things because Steve Harvey had spent decades watching families interact under pressure, and pressure had a way of revealing the cracks. The moment arrived in the fourth round. The question appeared on the board. Name something a father brags about doing for his kids. Anthony slapped the buzzer before anyone else moved. He was grinning. This was his territory. This was a question designed for a man like him, a man who had an answer ready before the question was finished. Taking them to their games and practices, Anthony said proudly, looking at Steve with the satisfied expression of a man who believed his own press. Steve nodded. All right, let us see. Taking them to games and practices. It was on the board. Number 3 answer. 21 points. Anthony clapped and pointed at the audience where Isaiah and Nia were sitting. That is right. That is what dads do. I am at every game, every practice. My kids know their daddy is always there. And that was the moment the room changed. Monique had been standing quietly at her podium. Her arms were crossed loosely. Her expression had not changed throughout the entire game. But when Anthony said those words, when he pointed at their children and claimed to be at every game and every practice, something in Monique's posture shifted. It was subtle. A straightening of the spine. A slight lift of the chin. The kind of movement that most people would miss entirely, but that Loretta, if she had been there, would have recognized immediately. It was the same posture Loretta had seen in the mirror every morning for 20 years. The posture of a woman who had reached the end of her silence. That is not true. Monique's voice was not loud. She did not shout. She did not scream. She said it the way you state a fact. The sky is blue. Water is wet. That is not true. The studio went quiet. Not gradually. Instantly, like someone had pressed mute on the entire room. Anthony turned to look at her. His smile was still frozen on his face, but his eyes had changed. Something flickered behind them. Not guilt. Not yet. Fear. The fear of a man who has been building a house of cards for years and just felt the first gust of wind. What? Anthony said, his voice tight. Monique unfolded her arms and turned to face him fully. She was not looking at Steve. She was not looking at the cameras. She was looking at her husband. And in that look was every missed game, every empty chair, every broken promise, every lie he had told to every person who had ever called him a good father. Anthony, you were not at Isaiah's reading night. You were not at Nia's dance recital. You did not coach his team. Mr. Williams coached his team. You showed up one time for 20 minutes and left. You do not read to them at night. I do. You do not check homework. I do. You do not take them anywhere. I take them everywhere. Every single time. And then you stand up in front of people and you tell them you did it. She paused. The studio was so silent that the hum of the stage lights sounded like thunder. I have listened to you lie about being a father for 3 years. Monique continued, her voice steady and clear. I listened to you lie at Thanksgiving dinner in front of my entire family. I listened to you lie to your mother on the phone. And now you are standing on national television, pointing at our children, Anthony, and lying again, and I cannot do it anymore. I will not. Steve Harvey had not moved. He was standing between the two podiums, his cue cards hanging at his side, his mouth slightly open. The producers would later say that in all his years of hosting, they had never seen Steve Harvey completely frozen. But that was the only word for it. He was frozen. Not from confusion, from recognition. Steve Harvey had grown up without a consistent father. He had talked publicly about what that absence had done to him. And he was watching a woman fight in real time to make sure her children did not grow up believing a lie about what fatherhood looked like. Anthony's face had gone through several stages in the span of 30 seconds. Shock, embarrassment, anger, and finally, something raw and exposed that he could not cover up with a smile or a joke or a social media post. He was standing on a stage with nowhere to hide, and the woman who had been hiding his truth for years had just set it free. Monique, Anthony said, his voice low and strained. You are making this into something it is not. I do things for those kids. Maybe I am not perfect, but I am there. Monique shook her head slowly. No, Anthony, you are around. There is a difference. Being around means your body is in the house. Being there means your children can count on you. Isaiah cannot count on you. He told me that himself. At 7 years old, my son said, I knew he was not coming. 7, Anthony, he was 7 when he stopped believing you. A woman in the second row of the audience put her hand over her mouth. Several other audience members were visibly emotional. Nia, sitting in the audience section with Tanya, had buried her face in her aunt's shoulder. Isaiah sat very still, watching his parents with those quiet, observant eyes, and there was something in his expression that was far too old for a 9-year-old. It was the look of a child who had been carrying a truth that the adults in his life had been too afraid or too proud to speak. Steve Harvey finally moved. He set his cue cards on the podium. He walked to the center of the stage directly between Anthony and Monique, and he raised both hands. Stop the clock, Steve said. His voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. Stop everything. The production team froze. The timer went dark. The board went blank. 200 people in the audience sat in complete stillness. Steve stood there for a moment, gathering himself. Then he spoke. I am not going to pretend that I did not hear what just happened. And I am not going to move on to the next question like it did not matter. Because it matters. What this woman just did matters. And what this man just did, what he has been doing, matters even more. Steve turned to Anthony. His expression was not angry. It was something deeper than anger. It was disappointment. The kind of disappointment that comes from one man looking at another man and seeing a failure he recognizes because he has lived close to it himself. Anthony, I need to talk to you, not as a host, as a man who grew up without a father who showed up. I know what it does to a kid when the person who is supposed to be their hero turns out to be a ghost. I know what it feels like to sit in a room and wait for someone who is not coming. And I know what it does to your soul when you finally stop waiting. Steve took a step closer to Anthony. His voice dropped, intimate and direct. Your son is 9 years old. He is sitting right there. And he already knows. Do you understand what that means? It means the lie is not working. It never worked. The only person who believed it was you. Your wife knew. Your kids knew. And now everyone in this room knows. So the question is not whether you can keep pretending. The question is whether you have the guts to stop. Anthony's jaw was clenched. His eyes were wet. The construction supervisor who managed crews of 50 men, who gave orders all day, who walked through job sites with authority and confidence, was standing on a game show stage looking like a man who had just been shown a photograph of himself he had never wanted to see. Steve turned to Monique, and when he spoke to her, his voice changed completely. The firmness was still there, but underneath it was something tender, something reverent. Monique, I want to tell you something. What you just did took more courage than anything I have seen on this stage. You did not do it to embarrass your husband. I can see that. You did it because your children deserve a father who shows up, and they deserve a mother who refuses to let anyone, even the man she married, lie about what that looks like. Your mother raised you right. Whatever she taught you, it worked. Because you are standing here fighting for your kids the exact same way she fought for hers. Monique's composure finally cracked, not dramatically, a single deep breath that shook on the way out. Her eyes filled with tears, but she did not look away. She held Steve's gaze and nodded once, the way soldiers do when someone acknowledges the battle they have been fighting alone. Steve turned back to the cameras. I want every father watching this to hear me. Being a dad is not a highlight reel. It is not a social media post. It is not a Thanksgiving toast. Being a dad is showing up to the reading night even when you are tired. It is sitting on the floor and doing homework with your kid even when you do not understand the math. It is being in the chair at the recital, not because anyone is going to take a picture of you, but because your daughter is going to look out into the audience and she needs to see your face. That is it. That is the whole job. Just be there, actually, physically, consistently there. And if you cannot do that, then at least have the decency to stop lying about it. Because your kids know. They always know. The audience gave a standing ovation that lasted so long the floor director looked at the producers for guidance on what to do. Nobody knew what to do. This had never happened before. Steve walked over to Anthony one more time. He put his hand on the man's shoulder. Not aggressively, almost gently, the way an older brother handles a younger one who has made a serious mistake. Anthony, you still have time. Your son is 9. Your daughter is 6. They are still young enough to see you change. But the window is closing, brother. Every day you perform fatherhood instead of practicing it, that window gets a little smaller. And one day it is going to shut. And when it shuts, it does not matter how many photos you post or how many toasts you make. It is done. Do not let it be done. Anthony looked at Steve for a long moment. Then he looked past Steve to the audience section where Isaiah was sitting. The boy was looking directly at his father. Not with anger. Not with sadness. With a question. The same question he had been asking silently for years. Are you going to show up? Anthony's face crumbled. The performance was over. The mask came off. And what was underneath was a man who was terrified. Terrified that his son had already answered that question for himself. I hear you, Anthony said, his voice barely audible. I hear both of you. And I hear what I have been too proud to hear for a long time. My kids deserve better. Monique deserves better. He stopped, swallowed, started again. I do not know how to be the father I say I am. I never learned. My dad was not around either. And I thought if I just said the right things it would be enough. But it is not enough. Saying it is not the same as doing it. I know that now. Monique looked at her husband. She did not rush to comfort him. She did not tell him it was okay. She just looked at him with an expression that held 10 years of exhaustion and a thin, cautious thread of hope. Then do it, she said. Stop saying it and do it. Show up to the next game. Stay for the whole recital. Read Nia her book tonight. Not tomorrow. Tonight. That is all I have ever asked. Steve stepped back and let the moment settle over the studio like a blanket. Then he said something quietly, almost to himself, that the microphones barely caught. That right there is what a family looks like when it decides to tell the truth. It is messy. It is painful. And it is the only thing that can save them. The producers kept every second of the confrontation in the final cut. Not a single frame was edited out. The executive producer told an interviewer afterward that cutting any part of it would have been a betrayal of the moment. Monique had earned every second of that airtime with years of silence, and the least they could do was let the world hear what she had to say. When the episode aired 5 weeks later, it detonated across the internet with a force that even the most experienced social media teams could not have predicted. The clip of Monique saying that is not true was viewed over 40 million times in the first 72 hours. It was shared on every social media platform in existence. It was translated into more than a dozen languages. It became a meme, a rallying cry, and a mirror that millions of families held up to their own lives. The phrase performance parenting entered the national conversation almost overnight. Parenting bloggers wrote about it. Psychologists discussed it on morning shows. Teachers shared the clip in staff meetings because they recognized the pattern immediately. They had seen it 1,000 times. The father who showed up on back-to-school night with a big smile but was unreachable every other day of the year. The father whose name was on the emergency contact form but whose phone went to voicemail when the school actually called. Monique was flooded with messages from women across the country, thousands of them, women who recognized Anthony in their own husbands. Women who had been the silent partner, the invisible engine, the one who did the actual work of parenting while someone else took the credit. The messages came from every state, every background, every kind of family. A military wife in Texas who said her husband told everyone at the base that he was an involved father. But she had been raising their 3 children alone through every deployment and every stateside assignment. A teacher in Minnesota who said her ex-husband posted photos of their kids every Sunday but only saw them twice a month. A grandmother in Georgia who said she had raised her grandchildren for 8 years while her son told people he was the primary caretaker. But the messages that hit Monique the hardest were from the children. Adults now, many of them, who had grown up with performance fathers. They wrote to her saying that watching the clip had unlocked something they had been carrying for decades. The feeling of sitting in the audience and scanning the crowd for a face that was not there. The feeling of hearing their father take credit for things their mother had done. The feeling of being 9 or 10 or 12 years old and understanding, with a clarity that no child should possess, that their father's love was a story he told other people rather than something he actually gave to them. One letter, from a 32-year-old man named Marcus in Philadelphia, was shared publicly with his permission and went viral on its own. He wrote, "I was Isaiah. I was the kid who stopped waiting. I stopped waiting when I was 8. I am 32 now, and I still have not started again. When I watched your wife say those words on that stage, I cried for the first time in years. Not because it was sad, because someone finally said it out loud. Someone finally told the truth about what it is like to have a father who is a character instead of a parent." Anthony did not run from the fallout. He did not deactivate his social media. He did not issue a carefully worded statement through a publicist. What he did was simpler and harder than any of those things. He went home, sat down at the kitchen table with Monique, and asked her to tell him everything. Every lie she had covered for. Every moment she had handled alone. Every time the kids had been hurt by his absence. He asked her to tell him all of it, because he said he needed to hear it without the protection of an audience or a camera or a crowd to perform for. Monique told him everything. It took 3 hours. She started with Isaiah's reading night and ended with the Thanksgiving toast. She did not raise her voice. She did not cry. She had done enough crying in bathrooms and laundry rooms and parked cars over the years. What she gave Anthony was not emotion. It was evidence. A detailed, unflinching record of every moment he had missed and every lie he had told about missing it. When she finished, Anthony did not make excuses. He did not say she was exaggerating. He did not deflect. He sat at that table and said 3 words that Monique had been waiting to hear for years. "You are right." Not "I am sorry." Not yet. First, "You are right." Because acknowledgement had to come before apology. He had to stop arguing with reality before he could start repairing it. Anthony enrolled in a fatherhood mentoring program run by a nonprofit in Chicago. The program paired absent or disengaged fathers with mentors who had walked the same road and come out the other side. His mentor was a 55-year-old retired firefighter named James, who had lost custody of his children in his 30s because of his own disengagement and had spent 15 years rebuilding those relationships from scratch. James did not coddle Anthony. He did not tell him it was okay. He told him the truth, which was that showing up late is better than not showing up at all. But showing up consistently is the only thing that actually works. He told Anthony that children do not need grand gestures. They need patterns. They need the boring, repetitive, unsexy reliability of a parent who is in the chair, at the table, in the car, night after night after night. That is what builds trust. Not one amazing weekend. Not a viral social media post. Just showing up. Again and again and again until your child stops checking whether you are going to be there because they already know you will. Anthony started small. He picked Isaiah up from school on Wednesdays, every Wednesday, without fail. Rain or shine, tired or not. He sat in the car line and waited, and when Isaiah walked out and saw his father's truck, the boy's face would change. Not into excitement. Not yet. Into something more cautious than that. Into something that looked like a question being slowly, tentatively answered. He started attending Nia's dance classes. Not performing. Not posting about it. Just sitting in the back row of the studio on a folding chair, watching his daughter spin and stumble and spin again, clapping when she looked at him for reassurance. Nia did not care that he had missed years of recitals. She was 6. She cared that he was here now, and every time she looked back and saw him in that chair, she smiled so wide it nearly broke his heart. He stopped telling stories about being a father. He stopped making toasts. He stopped posting. He just did it. Quietly, consistently, without an audience. And that, more than any speech or apology or social media post, was the thing that began to rebuild what his lies had almost destroyed. 6 months after the episode aired, Steve Harvey invited the Davis family back for a follow-up segment. When they walked onto the stage, The change was visible. Anthony did not walk in front of the family this time. He walked in the middle, holding Nia's hand. Isaiah walked beside Monique, but he kept looking up at his father with an expression that was different from the one he had worn 6 months earlier. The question was still there in his eyes, but it was softer now, less guarded, like the answer was starting to come through. Steve greeted them warmly. He hugged Monique. He shook Anthony's hand and held it for an extra beat. "Talk to me," Steve said. "How are we doing?" Anthony spoke first, and his voice was different. Quieter, less rehearsed. He was not performing. "Mr. Harvey, 6 months ago I stood on this stage and I lied about who I was as a father. My wife called me out in front of the whole world, and it was the worst moment of my life. But it was also the most important moment of my life. Because for the first time, I could not hide behind words. I had to face the truth. And the truth was that I was a ghost. I was in the house, but I was not in the family. My kids knew it. My wife knew it. And deep down, I knew it too. I just did not want to admit it, because admitting it meant I had to change, and changing is hard." He paused, took a breath, looked at Isaiah. "I have been picking my son up from school every Wednesday for 6 months. I have not missed a single one. I have been going to my daughter's dance class every Saturday. I have not missed one of those either. It is not enough to make up for the years I was not there, I know that. But it is a start. And I am going to keep starting every single day until my kids do not have to wonder whether their father is going to show up. Until they just know." Steve nodded slowly. Then he turned to Monique. "Monique, what do you see?" Monique was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice carried the steady strength that had always been there, the strength she had inherited from Loretta, the strength that had held her family together through years of disappointment. "I see a man who is trying. That is all I ever asked for. I did not need Anthony to be perfect. I needed him to be real. For 3 years he gave me a performance. Now he is giving me presence. And there is no comparison between those two things. Presence is harder. It does not come with applause or likes or compliments from friends. It is just you and your kid at a kitchen table doing math homework at 9 o'clock at night. It is boring. It is tiring. And it is the most important work there is." Steve looked at the cameras and spoke directly to the millions of viewers at home. "I want every parent watching this to write down what Monique just said. Presence over performance. That is the whole sermon. You can close the book. That is it. Your kid does not need you to be famous. Your kid does not need you to be rich. Your kid does not need you to tell everyone what a great parent you are. Your kid needs you to be in the chair, at the table, in the car line, every week, every day, no cameras, no audience, just you and them. That is parenting. Everything else is a commercial." The audience stood. The applause went on for nearly 2 minutes. Isaiah, sitting in the front row this time, not hidden in the audience section, looked at his father on that stage and did something small that broke everyone who noticed it. He gave a thumbs up. Just a quick one. A 9-year-old boy's way of saying, without words, "I see you, Dad. Keep going." In the years that followed, the impact of Monique's moment on Family Feud rippled outward in ways nobody could have predicted. The fatherhood mentoring program Anthony had joined saw applications increase by over 400% in the year after the episode aired. Schools across the country began hosting consistency over spectacle nights, events designed not as one-time showcases, but as the beginning of ongoing father-child engagement programs. The phrase presence over performance became a tagline for parenting workshops, church sermons, and family counseling sessions nationwide. Monique started an annual event in Chicago called The Real Showing Up, a community gathering where families celebrated the everyday acts of parenting that no one posts about. The dinners that get made, the permission slips that get signed, the bedtime stories that get read, the small, invisible, unglamorous moments that are the actual architecture of a childhood. The first event drew 200 families. By the third year, it filled a community center with over 1,000 people. Loretta attended every single one. She sat in the front row, watching her daughter stand at a microphone and speak to a room full of families about the importance of showing up. And every time, Loretta would think about all those years she had worked double shifts and braided hair and packed lunches alone. And she would feel something she had spent a lifetime denying herself permission to feel. Pride, not for what she had endured, for what her endurance had produced. A daughter who refused to let silence become a family tradition. Steve Harvey kept a photo from the follow-up segment in his office. It was not a posed picture. It was a candid shot taken by a crew member during a break. In the photo, Anthony is kneeling on the stage floor, and Isaiah is standing in front of him, and they are looking at each other. Not smiling, not performing, just looking. Father and son, seeing each other clearly, maybe for the first time. Steve once told an interviewer that the photo reminded him of something his mentor had told him decades ago. You cannot fix what you will not face, and you cannot face it alone. He said Monique had forced Anthony to face it. And the rest, the Wednesday pickups, the Saturday dance classes, the math homework at the kitchen table, that was Anthony learning not to face it alone anymore. The story of Monique Davis and the day she destroyed her husband's lie on live television was never really about the lie. It was about the silence that protected it. For 3 years, Monique's silence had been the foundation that Anthony's performance was built on. The moment she removed that foundation, the whole structure came down. And in the rubble, for the first time, there was room to build something real. Years later, when Isaiah was in high school, he wrote a college application essay about the day his mother spoke up on Family Feud. The essay did not focus on the confrontation or the viral moment or Steve Harvey's speech. It focused on the Wednesdays after the show, when his father started picking him up from school. He wrote about how the first few Wednesdays were awkward, how they barely talked, how he kept expecting his father to stop coming. But his father did not stop. Week after week, the truck was there. And slowly, the silence between them turned into conversation. And the conversation turned into something Isaiah had spent most of his childhood wanting, but had been too afraid to name. A relationship. The essay ended with a single line that the admissions office would later cite as one of the most memorable sentences they had read that year. My mother's voice gave me my father back, and my father's consistency gave me the one thing his words never could: proof.